My name is Ahmed. For years, I stood at the front of a classroom, teaching the very essence of faith as a Qur'an instructor. I was respected, even revered, in a conservative neighborhood where tradition held the power to bind. Yet amid the accolades and blind obedience, there was a haunting emptiness eating away at my soul, a turmoil I dared not voice. I felt like a puppet trapped in a dance I never chose, and in that silence, something vital was awakening. The prayers that once brought me peace became burdens, echoes of doubt screaming in my heart. What if everything I believed was built on fear? What if the very faith I upheld was a shackle instead of salvation? These thoughts plagued me, sending me spiraling into a chasm of existential dread I never thought possible. Then came the accident, an excruciating moment that would unravel my reality. In that fleeting instant between life and death, I plunged into darkness. And it was there, in the abyss, that I encountered Jesus. Yes, the Jesus I was taught to deny. He didn't chastise me. He illuminated the truths obscured by fear and misunderstanding. What I saw was a spiritual battle raging beneath the surface. A war not just for my soul, but for truth itself. I was terrified, but also awakened. Returning to life was not a relief. It was a cacophony of rejection, accusations of heresy, and a wrestling match with guilt. My family, the ones I loved dearly, could not accept this new path. "Call me a traitor," they said. Yet, deep inside, a fire of purpose stirred. I could not stay silent. Jesus called me not just for me, but for others like me. So now, as I share my journey, I urge you to pay attention. Because what you are about to hear is more than my testimony. It's an invitation to see beyond the veil, to understand the deeper truths that bind us all. There is hope, even amidst suffering. Before we dive deeper, let me ask you this. Where are you watching from, and what time is it right now in your corner of the world? I want to connect with you on this journey. And if you love Jesus, subscribe to Truth from Beyond. This isn't just a channel. It's a lifeline for revelations yet to come. In the heart of a conservative neighborhood in Saudi Arabia, I lived a life bound by tradition and expectation. Growing up amidst whispers of spiritual fervor, I believed I was content. I was a mosque leader, revered in my community. Yet my mind often wandered to questions that lingered beneath the surface. The rigid adherence to Islamic traditions dismissed my urge for individual expression. Still, I was deep in the routines of life, preaching adherence to faith as a shield against the complexities of the world. Little did I know that the very beliefs I upheld would soon be challenged, testing the core of my existence. My life took a drastic turn one fateful evening. I was driving home, the sun setting behind the mountains, a blood-red hue staining the horizon. I felt a sudden jolt. The crash was deafening. In that instant, reality melted away. I found myself suspended between life and death, floating in an abyss. What could have been terror morphed into an unsettling serenity. Then, enveloped in light, I glimpsed a figure. It was Jesus. His presence filled the space, exuding love and warmth that washed over me like a healing balm. In that moment, the divisions of the world, the constructs of religion, disappeared, leaving only the raw essence of truth. As I stood before him, Jesus began to reveal hidden agendas woven into the fabric of our society, deceptions carried out by the elite, the machinations of power that perpetuated spiritual war. I watched visions unfold, images of conflict, cries for justice echoing through continents, and the manipulation of truth, all aimed at dividing humanity. The weight of these revelations pressed heavy on my heart. I could see how leaders, in pursuit of their ambitions, had crafted narratives leading to fear and division. I felt an urgency, a calling to awaken from the slumber that had clouded my understanding. Then he told me of an awakening that was unfolding, a new revelation destined to break through the shadows of deception. I glimpsed the struggles faced by my people, the suffocations of faith lingering in silence among those too frightened to speak their truth. I understood that there were battles not fought with swords or bombs, but with ideas and hearts. The spiritual war was real, and the stakes were higher than I had ever imagined. Jesus spoke to my heart, urging me to recognize the strength of faith beyond traditions. It was a call to discern truth from lies, to awaken my spirit and awaken others. I felt a powerful surge of emotions, fear, hope, urgency, as I understood that I was meant to share these revelations. The need was dire, and my fate was intertwined with the future of humanity. As I was pulled back toward my corporeal being, the visions of a world yearning for light and connection flickered in my mind. The echoes of my environment called me back, the harsh reality of the accident. But the message was clear. I was no longer just a leader. I was a messenger. I'm Ahmed, a 30-year-old Qur'an teacher, the proud son of a respected imam in our community. From the outside, I seemed to live a life that others might envy: stability, respect, a sense of belonging. But deep down, I've been wrestling with a profound emptiness, a nagging sense of purposelessness that I couldn't quite shake. Each day as I taught verses from the Qur'an, my heart felt heavy under layers of expectation and duty. I found myself performing my role impeccably, yet inside, I was crumbling. The tight grip of tradition and the fear of judgment kept me silent, trapping me in a cage of my own making, where I struggled with unspoken doubts and a longing for something more. It was a chill evening when it all changed, an accident that would tip my world upside down. I remember driving home, the air thick, with the scent of dust and the fading light painting everything in muted tones. One moment, I was lost in thought. The next, there was a deafening crash. I felt an odd release as the chaos of the world slipped away, and I was pulled into a void. There, I floated, untethered, in a realm that defied explanation. Suddenly the light brightened, and there he was, Jesus, bathed in radiant glory. His presence pierced through the darkness that clouded my spirit, filling me with warmth and a sense of belonging I had never felt. Jesus spoke to me with a voice that felt both gentle and thunderous. He revealed to me the hidden agenda behind the spiritual war consuming our world. The layers of deception created by the elite flashed before my eyes like a film, showing how they manipulate belief systems to control the masses. I saw leaders in shadows, crafting wars not just for territory, but for the very souls of people. I realized that the divide I felt in my community, the restless dissent, rising among the youth, wasn't just a personal struggle. It was part of a greater battle for truth, an awakening waiting to unfold. As he continued to speak, I was shown the stark reality of our society, how fear and division were employed as weapons against us. The conflicts depicted in my visions felt painfully real, an urgency surging within me, urging action. I saw families torn apart by beliefs, communities suffocated by silence, all manipulated by a deceptive narrative that kept us in chains. It was disheartening. But along with that weight, there was a spark of hope. Jesus promised that an awakening was on the horizon, a chance to break free from the grip of confusion and rediscover the truth that lay buried beneath the surface of our existence. I can still feel the intensity of that moment as I return to my body. The blaring sound of sirens and distant voices drew me back to a world I barely recognized now. Suddenly, I was not just a Qur'an teacher. I was a vessel filled with revelations, a messenger burdened with the urgency to share what I had learned. The world outside felt heavier, darker, a kaleidoscope of suffering and fear, yet illuminated by the potential for a deeper truth. As I opened my eyes in the hospital, I knew I had work to do. a mission to awaken my brothers and sisters, to break the silence that had suffocated my spirit for far too long. As I joined my fellow worshippers every day, participating in prayers and rituals that had been part of my life for as long as I could remember, I began to feel an unsettling emptiness inside me. Each Allahu Akbar echoed in my ears, but instead of solace, I felt a growing void. An emotional rift pulled at my heart, a disconnect between the fervent devotion I was expected to embody and the deep-seated doubts that clouded my spirit. It was bewildering to question everything I'd held as truth. I looked around at those lost in prayer, their faces serene, while mine twisted with confusion. The whispers in my mind grew louder, yet I couldn't speak them aloud. Fear of judgment and condemnation silenced my inner turmoil. In the quiet of the night, those doubts morphed into vivid dreams that felt all too real. I found myself trapped in scenarios of deception, witnessing events that replayed the darkness lurking in our world. I saw people blindly following leaders who betrayed their trust, manipulated by hidden agendas that exploited their faith. My heart raced with fear and anticipation as these dreams insisted upon presenting profound truths I could no longer ignore. Was my faith serving me? Or was it merely a tool of control, wielded by those who cloaked their ambitions in piety? The more I grappled with these thoughts, the more I understood that I was in the midst of a spiritual war, one not fought with swords, but with beliefs and ideologies. Each night, Jesus appeared in these dreams, illuminating the shadows haunting my waking life. He carried a message filled with urgency, revealing the deeper layers of deception woven by the elite. I wasn't just dreaming. I was being revealed truths hidden from the masses, truths that suggested a world beyond my early understanding of faith. He showed me how institutions, including mine, could become weapons in this unseen battle, using spiritual doctrine as a means of control rather than enlightenment. The fear coursing through the thick walls of adherence meant nothing in the face of such revelation. I felt the foundation of my beliefs shake, and though unsettling, it woke me to the possibility of an awakening, a chance to break through the confines of what I had been taught. As Jesus' teachings seeped into my conscience, I began to see the rifts within society more clearly. The growing divides between faiths, the manipulation of belief by those in power, and how technology increasingly rewrote truths to suit agendas. I saw families torn apart, communities shattered by internal strife, all under the guise of maintaining tradition. I understood now that the battles we were unwittingly fighting weren't confined to our neighborhoods or our homes. They stretched across borders, intertwining with the fate of nations. People were suffering, trapped in a cycle of fear, believing they were protecting their identities while being misled by narratives designed to maintain control. What struck me the hardest was the realization that I had been complicit in a system that nurtured this deception. Sitting at the foot of my community's expectations, I had been a silent participant in the very structures that stifled awakening. I felt called to something greater, to unveil the truth lurking in my own heart and to shout it to those still trapped in the shadows. The urgency felt overwhelming. I was being pulled toward a new path, where faith intertwined with genuine truth, a chance for liberation not just for myself, but for those who would hear me. As the nights progressed, I knew the time for silence was ending. I could feel the stirring of something magnificent inside me, but would I have the courage to act upon it? It happened on an ordinary day, a day like any other, when the unexpected jolt of life took a sinister turn. I was driving home from the mosque, the sun slowly dipping behind the horizon, wrapping the world in twilight. Suddenly, out of nowhere, I hit a patch of loose gravel, and everything spiraled into chaos. I remember feeling a disorienting slip of control followed by a bone-shaking impact. In that instant, darkness enveloped me like a heavy shroud. and I was thrown into an abyss my mind couldn't comprehend. I felt my spirit detach from my body, floating in a space that was at once terrifying and oddly serene. In that haunting stillness, I was met by a brilliant light. As I struggled to grasp what was happening, I heard a voice call my name, Ahmed. The tone was familiar, yet it resonated with ancient authority. It was Jesus. The moment he appeared, the darkness that had begun to seep into my very being was illuminated. I couldn't fully comprehend the depth of what I was experiencing. All I knew was an overwhelming warmth and love radiated from him, cutting through the confusion that had plagued my heart. He stood before me, not as a figure from religious stories, but as an embodiment of ultimate truth, someone who understood the spiritual war that raged within me and my nation. As Jesus spoke, I felt the truth seep into my soul. He showed me visions, horrific and enlightening visions, of the spiritual war that unfurled around us. I saw our leaders, shrouded in shadows, wielding faith as a tool to control the masses. Their hidden agendas exposed, I witnessed how deception wrapped around innocent hearts, keeping them in chains while they prayed for liberation. I understood, in that moment, that many of us were trapped, believing in a faith that had been manipulated to serve the interests of the elite. It was a terrifying, yet liberating, revelation. This wasn't just about me. No. This was about a greater awakening that was desperately needed across nations, and I felt an urgent calling to be a part of it. The visions intensified, and I saw the fractures in our society, ones that bled into the fabric of our daily lives. Families torn apart, friends divided by ideology, a world wrestling with its own reflection. The pain of separation echoed around me, and with each revelation, I felt the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. Jesus urged me to understand the gravity of the situation. I was being called to awaken not just for myself, but for the sake of others. I had spent too long in silence, too long clinging to the comforts of tradition that had ultimately led us into this abyss of darkness. The urgency of his message tore through my heart. I realized there was much work to be done. Then came an overwhelming sense of purpose. I felt charged with a mission to expose the hidden truths plaguing our communities. Jesus spoke of the divisions sowed to keep us at odds, reminding me that our strength lies in unity, that the deception aimed to keep us apart was not a battle we couldn't win together. He opened my eyes to the potential of a collective awakening, a chance to break free from the bonds of manipulation. Each revelation pierced through my fears, igniting a flame within me. I could feel the need for revolution in thought, a shift that could transform the darkness surrounding us into a beacon of hope. As I was slowly being drawn back into the confines of my body, the urgency of my mission began to crystallize. The blaring sirens of an approaching ambulance pulled me back to the surface, yet I was forever changed. I realized the significance of what had transpired. I was no longer just Ahmed, the Qur'an teacher. I was a witness to a truth that demanded to be shared, a truth that would shatter the chains of deception holding my people captive. Yet with the weight of such knowledge came a heavy burden. Would I have the courage to act on it? Would I be able to awaken others to realize the truth that lies beyond the veil of ignorance? The moment I regained consciousness, I was met, not with joy, but with a harsh and unyielding reality. The beeping of machines and distant voices faded into background noise as the weight of my experiences enveloped me. Jesus had illuminated truths for me during my near-death experience, and instead of finding solace upon my return, I felt the crushing pressure of despair. My family had always been my cornerstone, my community my refuge, but now I stood isolated, branded a heretic for daring to question the faith that had been my guiding light. The fear of judgment hung over me like a dark cloud, threatening to consume me entirely. I could feel the tension crackle in the air as I walked through the familiar streets of my neighborhood, transformed into a battleground between my old self and the new revelations. The disdain in the eyes of friends turned to hostility as whispers followed me like shadows. "Traitor," they muttered. "He's turned his back on the truth." Each word pierced my heart, filling me with an overwhelming guilt that clouded my clarity. My mind wrestled with doubt. Was I truly chosen for this path, or had I merely succumbed to deception? The internal conflict raged, a violent storm between the memories of teachings I had revered and the profound awakening that had shifted the landscape of my spirit. Every prayer I attempted felt hollow. The rituals I performed were stripped of meaning. They now seemed like chains binding me to a past I couldn't embrace. I was haunted by the fear of spiritual isolation, the nagging sensation that I was walking a path toward a profound abandonment, both from my community and from God. My thoughts spiraled as I replayed the visions Jesus had revealed to me, the true nature of the spiritual war unfolding around us. I struggled with the unsettling thought that faith itself could be exploited, twisted into a tool of control for leaders seeking power. The realization that I could become a weapon in this unseen battle was gut-wrenching. As days turned into weeks, I faced the relentless backlash from my family. Conversations over dinner morphed into accusations, questions filled with anger and disbelief. My father, once my greatest supporter, now looked at me with a mixture of disappointment and betrayal. "How could you turn your back on our way?" he asked, each word a dagger to my heart. I loved him fiercely, yet here I stood, a stranger in my own home, grappling with not just my faith, but with the very relationships that had defined my existence. Guilt suffocated me. How could I embrace these new truths when doing so meant tearing my family apart? In the depths of my isolation, I began to seek solace in scripture that had once guided my life. I pored over texts, searching for answers, longing to reconnect with the Jesus I had encountered. I found fragments of hope that spoke of transformation, of renewal through faith, not just my own, but for all of humanity. This awakening was not meant to isolate, but to unite, to challenge the hidden agendas of the elite that sought to manipulate the truths we held dear. I felt a flicker of resolve ignite within me. Perhaps my journey was not just for myself, but to awaken others trapped in the same cycle of deception. As I stood at the crossroads of faith and fear, I understood that the pull of purpose was stronger than the weight of rejection. I was reminded of the urgency in Jesus' words during my NDE, a call to action that resonated deeply. I could either retreat into darkness or step boldly into the light, risking everything to expose the truth. I felt the world around me shifting, a deep yearning for awakening vibrating in the hearts of those still caught in the web of misleading doctrines. I knew I must prepare to stand firm, to face the spiritual war head-on, redefined not by the isolation that threatened me, but by a truth so powerful that it could inspire others to break free from their own chains. In the aftermath of my awakening, I felt trapped in a paradox. Every breath reminded me of the rift between who I was and who I longed to become. The experience with Jesus had ignited a fire within me, a hunger for truth that couldn't be suppressed, yet I was acutely aware of the severe consequences that awaited if I pursued this path further. I began to search for answers in secret. Late at night, when the world lay in slumber, I would delve into the Bible, a book I once regarded with skepticism. I approached its pages like a forbidden treasure, feeling both exhilarated and terrified as new revelations unfolded. The words transformed before my eyes, shimmering with a fresh clarity that had been absent in my past readings. With every paragraph, I felt a deepening connection to a truth that resonated within my soul. Alongside my reading, I sought out videos and testimonies from individuals who had left their faith behind and found a new understanding of Jesus. Their stories, filled with struggle and transformation, mirrored my own confusion and desire for enlightenment. As I watched their journeys, I felt a thread of hope woven through the fabric of my newfound faith. They spoke of liberation from deception, of stepping out of the shadows and into the light. I learned of the spiritual war we were all part of, how so many others had also felt the stirrings of awakening that I was experiencing. Their testimonies were a lifeline to me, affirming that I wasn't alone in my quest for truth. Yet with each step forward, the looming threat of losing my family and cultural ties cast a long shadow over my heart. The weight of their expectations pressed heavily on me, muffling the peace that Jesus had provided. I worried about the conversations that would follow my eventual revelations, accusations of betrayal, the loss of love, and the alienation from everything I had ever known. The thought of being branded a traitor continued to haunt my waking hours. And yet, deep within, I felt a sense of peace, a guiding spirit encouraging me to press on despite the fears. Each prayer felt earnest, an invocation of faith that pushed me towards the spiritual truth I now craved. During the quiet of dawn, I began to pray more fervently to Jesus, pouring out my fears and insecurities, seeking guidance on how to navigate this turbulent ocean of emotions and expectations. My prayers felt like an anchor in the storm, helping me to discern the whispers of truth amidst the clamor of doubt. Each moment spent in prayer reassured me that I was not forsaken. Instead, I was being called. A yearning to publicly proclaim my faith took root within me, despite knowing it would sever ties with my past. The risk felt insurmountable, yet the possibilities of liberation and spiritual awakening began to overshadow my fears. It wasn't long before the decision came to participate in a clandestine baptism, a radical departure from everything I had known. In a secret gathering away from prying eyes, I found myself surrounded by others on similar journeys, all seeking an authentic relationship with Jesus. The air was thick with tension and excitement, the weight of our choices palpable. As I entered the water, I felt an overwhelming rush of emotions. This act wasn't just about religion. It was a declaration of war against the hidden agendas that had held us captive, an assertion of freedom in the face of deception. Emerging from the water, I felt reborn, yet the echo of my family's disappointment loomed larger than ever. A mix of exhilaration and dread settled in. The fight for truth and awakening had only just begun, and I was at the forefront, facing the storm that awaited me. As I sat in the quiet of my room, I began to confront a reality that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. The experience of meeting Jesus had profoundly altered my perception, and I knew that it was not just a personal epiphany. I felt a divine calling beckoning me forward, urging me to step into the light of truth that I had once feared. My mind raced with the implications of what this meant for my life, my family, and my community. I realized that remaining silent would betray the revelation granted to me. There was a bigger picture, a mission that extended beyond my own awakening, and I was meant to share it with others. The burden of this responsibility settled within me like a weighty mantle, but it also ignited a fierce determination to break free from the chains of deception that bound so many. I began to prepare for this mission, armed with the knowledge I had received. I understood that the spiritual war we were engaged in was not just about individual beliefs. It was a confrontation against the hidden agendas of the elite who sought to maintain control over our minds and spirits. Each day, the world seemed to spiral further into chaos, driven by divisions fueled by misinformation and manipulation. I was haunted by visions of loved ones who continued to walk in darkness, deceived by narratives that crushed their spirits. Something had to change. I firmly believed that the truth I had found could awaken others, but would they have the courage to listen? In this newfound urgency, I reached out to small groups of individuals, those who, like me, were searching for answers amid the fog of fear. We began to gather in secret, sharing stories of our spiritual journeys and discussing the messages hidden in Scripture that too often went overlooked. Together, we recognized how easily the powerful could wield faith as a weapon, twisting it to serve their agendas. It was a sobering realization, but it also became a rallying cry. The urgency in our conversations swelled as we realized that our collective awakening could shift the tides, igniting a movement that could challenge the status quo. I felt the fire of purpose ignite within me, propelling me forward in my mission. Courage was not the absence of fear. It was the determination to stand firm despite it. As I contemplated the risks of speaking out publicly, I understood the consequences that might follow. My family could turn against me, my community could shun me, and violence could easily descend upon me. Yet the risk of silence was a far greater danger. The thought of remaining complicit in the deception that had plagued us for too long felt unbearable. I could feel Jesus' presence guiding me, a beacon of strength that reminded me I was not alone. With every prayer, I felt his reassurance, urging me to share my testimony and the truths I had unearthed. The time for action had come. I organized a gathering that would become a pivotal moment in my life, a public declaration of faith anchored in truth. I invited not just those who had joined me in secret, but anyone willing to listen. I prepared to share my story, the revelations of my near-death experience, and the understanding of the spiritual war that enfolded us. I spoke passionately about the need for awakening, the importance of standing united against those who sought to manipulate our beliefs for their gain. As I poured out my heart, the fear that once bound me began to dissipate. It was replaced by a charged atmosphere that pulsed with possibility. I felt a divine presence enveloping the gathering, igniting a flame in the hearts of those who had once felt hopeless. As I stepped back from the podium, my heart raced with anticipation. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, and I knew that the path would not be easy. Yet, I felt emboldened by the shared commitment among my new brothers and sisters. Together, we were embarking on a quest to unearth the truth, to shine a light on the hidden agendas that had kept us trapped in cycles of fear and deception. The awakening was just beginning, and I was ready to face whatever trials lay ahead, fueled by the knowledge that this was not merely my path, but a collective journey marked by unity and purpose. Leaving my home was not just a geographical shift. It felt like shedding an entire identity woven into the very fabric of my being. After years of grappling with the weight of my awakening, the courage to step away from everything I had known surged within me. The moment I walked out that door, I felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. I was leaving behind the safety of familiarity for the uncertainty of the unknown, trading the community's expectations for the possibility of a life driven by truth and purpose. I understood that embracing my new path would mean facing significant challenges, including ostracization from my family and the harsh reality of the spiritual war unfolding on a global scale. Every step I took away from my past was accompanied by a lingering ache of loss, particularly for the relationships I had once cherished. I was no longer just Ahmed, the respected Qur'an teacher. I was becoming something entirely new, a seeker of truth steeped in the teachings of Jesus. It felt surreal to carry the weight of such a transition. Memories of my family's love and laughter echoed in my mind, but so did the reality of their rejection. The conflicting emotions created a storm inside me. Fear of isolation clashing with the hope that my journey might inspire others to awaken from their slumber. In my new life, I aimed to transform suffering into a catalyst for hope. I found myself drawn to serve my community, sharing the revelations I had experienced. Every conversation became an opportunity to shine a light on the deceptions that had held so many captive for far too long. Through evangelizing, I spoke of the hidden agendas that operated within our world, the veils of deception obscuring the truth. I wanted to help others understand the implications of the spiritual war around us. illustrating how we could reclaim our identities and fight back against the manipulation of the elite. Each story I shared felt like a small victory, a step towards healing the fractures in society created by fear and ignorance. Years later, in a new country, I continued this mission with a fervor that only amplified over time. Each day presented a new opportunity to connect with people from different backgrounds, each encounter a thread in the tapestry of a broader awakening. I watched as others began to embrace their own truths, inspired by their personal journeys of faith. In this new land, I felt that my presence was part of a divine tapestry unfolding, bridging gaps between cultures and beliefs. It became clear that my own transformation was not just for me. It was a call to action for others to rise and stand against the tides of deception that threatened our shared humanity. Yet as I embraced this new chapter, the longing for reconciliation with my family persisted. I knew the cost of my choices had been high, and I carried a weight of sorrow for the rift that had formed between us. Thoughts of my parents and their disappointment haunted me, serving as a reminder of the love that once bound us together. Part of me hoped that they would one day understand. The truths I fought for were not about abandoning them, but about illuminating the deeper truths of faith and love. I prayed for them, hoping that they would find their own awakening. Courage filled me, knowing that this journey was as much about healing as it was about sharing God's truth. The path ahead still felt uncertain, threaded with both hope and fear. I had taken bold steps, embracing a mission that I believed could transform hearts and communities. Yet, in my heart remained the question, how could I bridge the gap between my new identity and the connections I once held dear? The pain of division drove me forward, reminding me that the battle was larger than my own. The spiritual war we were fighting had implications far beyond individual beliefs. It was about uniting humanity against the shadows of manipulation that sought to divide us. I could feel the urgency rising within, knowing that the time for truthful revelation was now. As I stand here today, sharing my journey with you, I realize that this isn't just my story. It's a thread in the grand tapestry of awakening that is unfolding in our world. Have you felt it too? That deep, unsettling sense that something greater is at play. An invisible war for our hearts and minds, reaching out and calling us to recognize the truth in the midst of chaos? I know I'm not alone in this realization, and perhaps you're feeling the stirrings of your own awakening. Returning from the darkness where I met Jesus, I understand that I'm part of a greater mission. It's not merely about what I learned. It's about understanding the collective power we hold as seekers of truth. The divisions that separate us are not only barriers to faith, but are constructs designed to maintain control. There is an urgency for all of us to rise, to break down these barriers, and to awaken others who feel the weight of similar burdens. So I ask you, what is your truth? What steps will you take to uncover it? Your voice matters in this battle, and I want to hear your stories. Have you experienced a moment of clarity that changed your perception of the world? Share your experiences in the comments below. Each one of your stories adds to this beautiful narrative, a tapestry woven from the threads of truth, faith, and spiritual courage. Remember, you are never alone in your struggles. Together, we form a community seeking the light. And before you go, if this resonates with you, please take a moment to subscribe to Truth from Beyond and activate the notification bell. Every revelation we uncover together has the power to transform lives, and your support ensures that this message reaches those who need it most. Every subscription, every share, amplifies our collective call for truth. That awakening is possible. In our next video, brace yourself for another compelling testimony that will challenge everything you thought you knew about faith and awakening. I'm Ahmed, and I want to thank you personally for being part of this journey. Keep seeking, keep questioning, and remember, We are all part of this profound awakening, and the truth will rise to meet those who seek it.